The front area of the Presbyterian Church had a nice, big, large dirt place, and that was where a lot of the guys in the community, as soon as school was out, we headed there to play marbles. And of course, back then it was marble playing for keeps if you got off the school property. And so we couldn't wait to get to church. We wanted to go to church, just play marbles. And,
gambling in the churchyard.
There were 8 or 10 of us usually. We'd gather there, Preston Allen and Dwayne Castile, and I don't remember who all else, but we'd be there and enjoy playing marbles. And so somebody won all the marbles, and it's time to go home.
Okay.
Dick Harville's store.
Well, no, Dick Harville. Ann mentioned Dick Harville's store, and I've got a picture here somewhere too of.
Well, the girls didn't go there much.
Oh, we all did when I was in school.
It was right across from the school.
We would go at recess time. You could go cross the road and go to Dick Harville's, and you would buy Kit Kats for a penny. Dick Harville's store. And that was where we spent our recess.
Part of the time we were really supposed to go there. But also I have a picture of Vivian McCrary made standing in front of the store somewhere.
Well, I don't remember what grade it was that we got to go, but that was our recess time to go to Dick Harville's store. And you only needed a penny.
I think they had stopped us going at recess by the time I was that age, or else the fact that we didn't have any pennies, so I would. But I think you could go after. I think before school or after school, but not at recess any longer.
You were getting back into that age difference now.
Yep, they changed the rules.
We had when Ann first started, I think at Philadelphia, Myrtle Wendell perhaps was the principal for a year or two, and then Tom Rothwell came. And then after Tom left, Buddy Bost.
And he was there for years.
He was there many, many years.
And then your brother Red followed Mr. Bost. Was there anybody between them?
I have no idea.
I don't think so, but
I'm not sure. I don't think so
either.
But we were blessed with wonderful principals.
Well, earlier, each of you, we talked about your schooling in Philadelphia, and you had positive impressions. But who left the greatest impression on you, and why? In school.
From school.
At Philadelphia School.
Oh. Maybe Mr. Rothwell. I had him in the 7th grade, and then he went to Loudon Junior High. But he was so matter of fact, but so giving too. And he was my basketball coach. When I couldn't play much basketball, he never gave up on me. But I don't know, they're all special in their own way. Every teacher I had in Philadelphia was...
and it can be more than one.
Right. They were all special, and I had Miss Farrah Sloan in 5th grade, and she would get tickled at something, and she would just lose all control. And the whole classroom, we loved her because she would laugh. You know, and so many, when I went to school, they were so strict. You know, but Miss Long always had the best laugh.
And Vivian was a little bit like that too.
Yes.
She was like younger.
Yeah.
We had some pretty stern.
We most certainly did.
But they were good
Very
teachers.
Stern.
Really.
Yes.
I started with Helen Wendell, then Kansas Henderson, Vivian McCrary, and then Ada Griffiths, and that was 4th grade. Who am I skipping? Well, anyway, Mr. Bost in the 6th grade, and Myrtle Wendell in 7th, and Mr. Ross.
And Miss Millsaps.
That was my 5th grade.
Yeah, Miss Millsaps.
Yeah, Tommy's mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Miss, was it Kari?
Oh, I don't know. Miss Millsaps is good for me. I'm not sure.
Oh,
Julia.
Julia.
Julia, that's it.
Somebody
That's
sent me
it.
a Facebook message the other day and put her name on it, and I could not remember it.
Yeah.
No, I'd already forgotten it again.
Ruth?
Those first years, most of us had Miss Helen for first grade, Miss Kansas for second grade, and Miss Ada either for third or fourth grade. When I was there, we had 6 teachers for 8 grades. We didn't have enough for 8 teachers, so I was in split grades a lot of years. And those 3 ladies all taught, I think, in excess of 40 years, and all lived on adjoining farms going up Fort Creek Road. Miss Helen was at the Wendell farm, and Miss Ada was on the Griffiths farm, and Miss Kansas was on the Henderson farm, and they were the best of friends, and they taught all those years. Miss Helen Wendell, before she was Wendell, taught my father in first grade in 1918, and taught all 3 of his children in first grade, ending with me in 1957. She took some time out to have children in the middle, but I would have to say Buddy Bost, Mr. Bost. Mr. Rossville was gone by the time I started school. I was in Mr. Bost's room in a split grade in the 6th and then in the 8th. But we'd been in there in the 6th grade, so I already knew everything in the 8th grade because we heard it all. We soaked it all up while we were there, but I did not realize at the time how encouraging he was, how good he was with country students about helping them feel competent and capable. And as an adult, I got to thinking about it. Mr. Boss taught the 8th grade. He was the principal. He had a split grade of 6th graders in there. He ran the cafeteria. He coached all the sports teams, and he had a van, and he drove it as a school bus after school every day. At the time, I did not truly appreciate what that man was doing and the influence he had on generations of students that came out of Philadelphia.
I would agree with your selection there, Mr. Boss. We did, all the teachers were good, but Mr. Boss was he gave very freely of his time.
That was his life.
And that was his life. And during the summers, he would coach our baseball team. He would see that we had uniforms, we had balls, we had bats, and we traveled all over East Tennessee, playing from Athens to up above Knoxville. No league, no nothing. But we had uniforms, and we had a good team. And he was probably the most unlikely person, physically in terms of his background, to ever have been a coach.
Because he taught music after school.
Piano.
And he had severe arthritis from a very young age.
But he really learned a lot about playing baseball, and when we practiced every day in the summer morning. We'd be out there summer mornings when school was out. He'd be out there hitting ground balls to us. And said, no, I'm going to get 2 on this play here, get a double play, and this, that, and the other. And then we would all get in his car. At that time, he was driving about a 50, whatever. Now, this was after part of this was, I guess I was a freshman in high school or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, he had a Chevrolet. I think he had bought it brand new. And I believe Philadelphia perhaps was his first teaching assignment. I may be wrong on that. I don't know, but
it was very early in his career.
Very early.
I'm not sure if he taught a year or 2 in North Carolina before he came here.
He was related, and you can.
His sister married Joe Watkins.
Okay, yeah,
Miss
that's right.
Catherine Watkins.
I knew there was a connection, but I didn't know.
She was his sister, and I think that's the reason he came here.
Anyway, he was very, very giving of his time, and I don't know for sure that I ever saw that man get mad. That truly got mad.
No.
He got a little red in the face.
Yes, and he had and he had some of those big overgrown boys that were 16 years old that were still in 8th grade at Philadelphia. He could handle he just had a knack. He treated every human being the same, and he didn't talk down to his students. He was really, and I didn't appreciate all this at the time,
Right.
but I have come to really respect how he educated all of us in Philadelphia.
As we start to wind it down now, I would like to ask you just any interesting person from your Philadelphia background that kind of pops in your head, or somebody who made an impact on your life.
May I say one more thing
Oh,
about
sure.
Mr. Bost?
Mhm.
He was principal when I was in the 8th grade, when we haven't talked about integration. It was the smoothest. It went from one day to the next with no change, Wavetta Routledge was the one new member of my 8th grade class, and he just told us a day or two ahead that this was going to happen, and he didn't make a big deal about it. It was a wonderful thing, and I think Loudoun County as a whole, but Mr. Bost in particular, and I think Philadelphia had always had an excellent relationship, but I'd like to go back and study a little more about that time, and that I would put that on the list with Mr. Bost. And I didn't mean to interrupt, but the way they did things in this county, and people like Buddy Bost and Chig Routledge, we could study and learn from how they went through change and challenges and made it just seem normal. Excuse me for interrupting.
Well, as Ann mentioned, going to the Macedonia the church, they usually had afternoon services, if I'm remembering it. I remember well my dad and I going over there on Sunday afternoons, and it was we just went.
It was just a community.
It was.
I mean,
But
black,
that's
white,
the
it
reason
did
it's
not
hard.
matter.
It's
It was just a
The
loving
reason
community.
it's hard to pinpoint a person.
Yes.
But there's a caveat to that. You went to their church, but in those days, they were never invited to our churches. I was so pleased in recent years, the first time I went to a funeral in Philadelphia and there was a mixed audience, I thought we had finally arrived. We had good relationships, but that was a barrier that it took a long time to cross.
Okay, anything else you would like to share before we?
Well, you
get out
asked
here?
about individuals.
Yeah.
Of course, Mr. Bost was at school, but I have a very personal story, and I bet neither one of that Ann or Robert may not even know this gentleman. I mentioned earlier that Mr. Hyden was killed at the railroad track with his team about 1900. Well, he had a wife and 3 small boys when that happened. And those boys, 2 of them at least, they came out of Philadelphia with absolutely nothing, and they were brilliant. John and Leonard Hyden. John Hyden went to Maryville College with $1.25 in his pocket in 1910, and had to walk home from Maryville because it cost $1 to register, and he didn't have train fare. He went to Cornell eventually and got a PhD in math. He was head of the math department at Vanderbilt for decades. His brother, the chemist, got his PhD and worked for DuPont and Scott Paper Company and colleges. But when I was 3 years old, John Hyden started taking a 9-month appointment rather than a 12-month appointment at Vanderbilt. And he and his wife, Miss Louise, came and spent their summers in Philadelphia. He gave me my first candy bar. He fed me my first ice cream soda. He taught me to drive the tractor. He taught me about leverage and hauling rocks. He loaned me every book in his library. He provided my first trip out of Loudoun County, my first train ticket, my first airplane ticket. I've never had a better friend, even though he was well in his 60s by the time I was born. And he sent me $20 a month every month I was in college.
Now, did he retire in Philadelphia?
No, his brother did.
Okay.
John stayed in Nashville, and his brother Leonard, who was the chemist, came, or William as some people called him, William Leonard, came back here in retirement, built a cabin on the farm adjoining ours, and it's turned out over the years I have been able to buy that part of the farm and add it to mine. But he came back here and was a driving force in the community, in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, in the original, he raised the money for the original Loudoun County Senior Citizen Center. That's why it was the Hayden Senior Citizen Center.
Mm-hmm.
So Leonard came back here and lived for a few years before his death. But they started out with absolutely nothing. And I don't know what either one of their IQs was, but John had a huge amount of not just mental acuity, but common sense. Leonard was a wonderful human being. He was a little stronger in the IQ part, and his common sense might have been a little less evident than John's.
About what years were they born?
John was born in 1893, I believe, and Leonard was 2 or 3 years younger.
Okay.
And John had a philosophy, being the oldest, that he went to school, and then he encouraged and helped Leonard to go to school. And then Leonard helped his cousin Albert Griffiths to go to school. They were they were cousins, and they were the tenant farmers down there after Mr. Hayden died. And he encouraged Albert to go to school, and he ended up with a PhD in chemistry and taught at Maryville College for many, many years.
So they were in the age bracket where they probably went to the Bogart School then, correct?
Oh, yes, yes.
Definitely.
And John Hayden was the one that got to ring the bell at the Bogart School, because if you did not do it just exactly right, if you pulled it too hard, you turned the bell over. And he had this mathematical precision mind. He was the student that got to.
I wonder who helped them reach those goals. Like, you know, from Philadelphia to having nothing.
I
And now
think
you're
they had an
Vanderbilt.
aunt. They had a maiden aunt who never married, Aunt Flora, who came and lived with their mother after Mr. Hayden was killed. And I don't know her educational background, but I think she instilled the love of reading, the love of books. I think she was their influence in their formative years, and then these wonderful teachers that they had at Philadelphia School. But a lot of, because of their age and because they left and worked other places, if they had not been on the farm next door to us, and if our families had not been friends from 1910 on, when the Hendersons moved there, most people in Philadelphia would probably not even recognize those names. And yet they were among the most successful by educational and giving back to the world terms as anybody that's ever come out of Philadelphia. But John Hayden changed my life.
Well, I want to thank each of you for doing this. I've enjoyed it and learned quite a bit.
Did we make up any stories? Did we tell everything?
If you'd like to make one up now.
After she turns the camera off, we'll tell you the real story.
But we really appreciate it very much. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.